The Imperial cruiser lit the sky like a second moon and told the refugee convoy to heave to. I laughed quietly so only my bridge heard it and ordered the thrusters to kiss the pulsars, timing like a drummer catching the backbeat. We weren't faster, we were on time. The pulsar beat every zero. 713 seconds, a metronome carved into the dark. Each flash tore a slit in local space, tiny, regular, brutal as a factory press. If you rode the rhythm, you could slide a ship a hair's breadth without lighting up the obvious signatures. If you missed, you smeared yourself across physics like jam. Window in 3-2 mark. Nudge starboard 2 microrads, I said. The hull of USV Saratoga thrummed as our maneuvering rings drank the pulse's spill and turned it into sideways glide. Ahead of us, 62 ragged barges and habitat pods kept formation like a murmuration trying to remember it was once a city. The Imperial order barked again on broadband. Convoy heaved to for inspection. It came wrapped in that lacquered confidence Empire's use like perfume. My Zoe, Jonah Park, raised a brow. They brought a Sable class for refugees? Different flag, same playbook, I said. Paint me their pencil line. A holo-grid ghosted over the forward viewport. Their dreadnought, Varkesh's crown, held the high lane, her escort corvettes peeling out in a fan to pocket us. Smart, the pulsar's glare would wash out most sensors. They thought we were flying blind. Open convoy net. I didn't bother with titles. This is Captain Maya Reyes of the Saratoga. Stay tight on your assigned vectors. If you lose sight, hold velocity, do not brake. We'll bring you home. Home was a Kashari ring break called Omri 12, a belt of ice and iron hammered into latticework habitats. It wasn't much. Then again, Dunkirk's beach was just sand until the boats came. Captain, Sanvi Patel called from engineering, I can give you 30% more lateral if I tap the spool condensers as pseudo-capacitance, but the coils will hate us. Tell the coils to file a complaint. I pinched the ship wide to a whisper. All hands, we're doing the pulsar waltz. Think in eighth notes. If you can hear the rhythm, you're already late. We slipped another window, and the dreadnought grew on the scope like a bruise. Their comms cut in again, now with florid legalese about interdiction authority, trade compliance, developmental zones. Jonah muted them halfway through by grace of the Imperial Charter. I couldn't help it, I laughed. It wasn't contempt exactly. It was a pressure valve. Our species laughs over tax, audits, and funerals because if we don't, our hands start to shake. They're going to fire a lance, I said. They want to straighten a river by blasting the bends. Which bend do you want to be? Jonah asked. The one that was never there. I thumbed the tactical to the convoy. Omri 12, we're going to stitch a decoy lattice out of your oar skiffs. Anything with a mast driver becomes a drummer. Sync to our click. Orr and Zell Cruz, you're on refugee pods. Kashari, fold your poetry into the comms. Comms laughed. Captain, you want poetry? In World War Roman II on Earth, I said, keeping my tone even as the dreadnought's shield line flared. Navajo code talkers sent clean orders right under the enemy's nose because no one thought a living language could be a cipher. We'll use Kashari hexameter as rhythm math. T-Von, can your people hold meter under fire? Can you breathe under thunder? T-Von hissed, delighted. The Crown's prow brightened, singularity lance charging. They'd punch a needle-thin hole at near light, and any ship impaled would become a lesson in obedience. Sanvi fed me numbers. If they fire at the beat, they'll needle the space between pulses. If they fire off-beat, the pulse will scatter the focal. They're not artists, Jonah said. They'll fire on drums 1 and 3. Then we play on 2 and 4. The lance fired, the universe hiccuped. For a heartbeat, the stars behind us folded like origami, and then the blast tore through empty coordinates where we had been. A cheer rippled the net, I cut it. Save it for later. Corvettes on the left fan are throwing nets. Lateral in 5-4 now. We skimmed the pulse's shoulder, Saratoga complaining deep in her bones. The convoy slid obediently. The oar skiffs fired microslugs in a clockwork pattern, painting false gravities for the Imperials to chase. On a good day, deception is craft. Today it was survival. Captain Louis Ordega on comms whispered, "The Crown just sent a private hail. Surrender your command. We will be merciful. It's signed by a Lord Executor Varkesh." I toggled a narrow beam back. "Executor, I've got 62 boats full of kids and elders. Your mercy is late." "You will heave to," the voice replied, smooth as glass. "This region is under Imperial management. Unauthorized demographic transfers will be detained for processing." Jonah winced. Processing, always the friendliest word. I smiled without humor. "Executor, you ever listen to jazz? A beat. Explain. Syncopation. It's when you think the beat is here and then it isn't." I cut the channel and pointed at the forward plot. "Jonah, I want a gravitic slapshot. Use the pulsar's next 3 beats to load the rings. On 4, we dump sideways and pop chaff to look like we tore a seam." Sanvi swore softly. "We'll shear a support strut if I miss time by a 10th. "You won't," I said and meant it. She'd once threaded an orbital tether through hurricane bands to fix a wind farm. She could dance a ship through a metronome. The Crown's escorts sniffed at our decoys like hounds confusing footstep echoes. For a moment, everything held. Our timing, their arrogance, the razor of probability we were surfing. I thought of Midway, the way a carrier deck full of fueled planes could turn a plan into ashes in minutes, and felt the universe hold its breath. "Load, load, load." Sanvi's voice was tight wire. "Dump." The Saratoga lurched left as if yanked by a giant. The convoy followed like prayer beads sliding on a string. Behind us the chaff bloomed into a glittering wound, a convincing illusion of rupture. The dreadnought bit, snapping its lance at the false tier to seal it like a conscientious bureaucrat stamping a form. "We bought 90 seconds, Jonah said. "Then spend them," I answered. "All ships prepare for the hard part." The hard part was always the same, deciding who you were saving first. We cleared the dreadnought's reach and dropped into the shadow of a cold rubble field, one of Omri 12's unfinished rings, jagged as a broken crown. The pulsar's glare went from blinding to bearable. Our scopes breathed again. For a few quiet seconds, the convoy's chatter sounded like a cafeteria, 100 small worries colliding. "Damage tally," I said. "Microfractures along the B-ring," Sanvi reported. "I can patch with memory foam and prayers. We bled 20% of the lateral banks. If we need another slapshot, we'll owe the universe interest." "Refugee pods?" Jonah asked. "Pod 14 lost heat for 20 seconds, but the ore medics are on it. 1 sprained arm, 3 panic attacks." "Make that 4, Ordega muttered, hand over his own chest. He saw me see him and grinned. "Kidding, mostly." Omri 12 pinged a tight beam. The Keshari administrator's frill was a dull lavender, the color of a worn-out book. "Captain Reyes, you brought more than we prepped for." "Yeah," I said. "War has this habit. We have food for 22,000. You are bringing 49. We'll stretch," I said. "We always do." His frill brightened to sunset orange. "I marked you stubborn in the file. I'm trying to make it a virtue." A flag from the rear lit up. 3 Imperial corvettes had cut wide and were weaving through the rubble. The dreadnought held distance now, patient, letting its pack work the close quarters. Different doctrine. They decided to bleed us instead of bludgeon us. "Reminds me of the little boats," Jonah said. "Dunkirk, civilians threading a gauntlet because no one else could." "We have little boats," I said. "They're just ugly." "Ugly works," Ordega said. "I married ugly, he cooks." A laugh rippled the bridge, not the giddy kind from the first escape, but the kind that says we remember we're alive. "Broadcast on Convoy Net," I said. "Citizens Fleet Protocol is now active. If you have a tug, a drone, a tractor, a kite with a magnet, you're in the Navy. Omri 12, we need a port assignment and a list of ships with empty ballast." "Captain," the Keshari said, "you mean to unload people into ore bins?" "For 12 hours," I said. "Warm them, feed them, love them, and then we reshuffle. We'll make streets out of hallways. We've done this in hurricanes. We can do it in vacuum." A flicker on long range, a bigger shadow slipping into the pulsar's glare. Jonah leaned forward. "Sable Crown's big sister." The scope tagged it, an Imperial supercarrier, the Ardent Oath, translating in on a clean hypervector, conservative, efficient, practiced. The dreadnought had been the knock, this was the battering ram. Ortega's voice went quiet. They didn't bring that to negotiate. Sanvi's words came like a metronome. If they launch a wing, the rubble field turns into a grape press. I closed my eyes for a breath. Stoics said we controlled judgments, not externals. Virtue ethics said character was choice in habit. Just war said proportionality and non-combatant immunity were not optional. I opened my eyes and chose. Jonah, push an open hail to the oath. The reply came from a voice that would never stutter. This is Matriarch Commander Lass of the Ardent Oath. You are harboring unauthorized migrants and interfering with imperial resettlement. Commander, I said, light as I could make it, you are arriving in the middle of a humanitarian corridor. If you fire in here, you crush children. We both know that. I'm asking you to stand off. Stand off. The pause tasted like disbelief. You are outgunned. Outgunned is not the same as out-obligated. No answer. Then you have 6 minutes to surrender for processing. Processing, Ortega murmured again, their friendly word. The convoy net was a hum. Panic has a pitch you can feel in your molars. I killed our internal speakers and looked at my crew. Midway wasn't won by being bigger, I said. It was won by being where the enemy didn't expect and by people willing to run deck crews through fire. We're not deck crews, but we can be unexpected. T-Von slid onto the bridge, breath sharp. Our poets are ready to sing numbers at your command. Good, we'll need meter. I sketched the plan. We'd turn the rubble into a mirror swarm using cargo containers with reflective skins to confuse the carrier's targeting. The ore skiffs would lay a highway of ferrous grit to make the corvettes think gravity was slightly to the left. Meanwhile, we'd build a false exodus, 20 empty pods dressed in heat and heartbeat, drawing the pack. It's a lot, Jonah said, for 6 minutes. I only need 3, I said. I need every civilian on Omri 12 to believe they are part of the fleet. Ortega's grin came back, feral this time. I can sell that. We burned for the ring break, shedding decoy panels like feathers. Sanvi cajoled the maneuvering rings into one more dance step, whispering promises I hoped we could keep. The rubble became orchestra, every beat a chance, every miss a bruise. First corvette closing, Jonah said. They're sniffing the false exodus. Let them, I said, and when they bite, pull the hook. The corvette fired a net, tangling heat ghosts. The net sparked against mirror skins and spat telemetry like a drunk. The corvette slewed, confused, opening its belly. We put a pebble there, not a missile, a pebble, a dumb mass at rude speed, 1 step below a bullet, 1 step above a prayer. The corvette folded like paper, silence on the net. Then the carrier spoke, and this time the voice had edges. You have killed an imperial crew. You were trying to net infants, I said. Change your doctrine. I will change your horizon. Their fighter bays opened. A black spill of gnats poured out, glittering with engine spines. Here we go, Ortega breathed. Then a new tone cut through the band, thin, ugly, promising hope. Omri 12 had lit its municipal sirens on wide beam. Every shop and school and hollow tree sang the same note, we're awake. The little boats, Jonah said, smiling without looking away from the scope. Yeah, I said, and felt my own hand steady. The little boats. The fighters arrowed in. The rubble sang. The convoy tucked closer. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a decision like a blade waited for me because the carrier wasn't just bringing fighters. It was bringing a message drone aimed not at us, but at Omri 12's life support hub. Captain, Sanvi said, voice soft, they're going to shut the air off. And make us choose, I said, convoy or city. The hard part had arrived. We split the ship. On paper it's impossible. In practice you do it with will and duct tape. Jonah took a swarm, 8 skiffs, the Saratoga's port drones, and half our Marines on a fast burn toward the life support hub. I kept the Saratoga in the rubble with the convoy. Neither group had enough of anything. Both had more than nothing. Philosophy loves tidy dilemmas. Command gets sticky ones. Jonah, I said on a private channel, you have 11 minutes before the drone kisses the hub. I'll be back in 10, he said, because good lieutenants lie kindly. T-Von leaned over my shoulder. Permission to broadcast the poem. Give me your first stanza. Their voice fell into hexameter, syllables stepping like soldiers. It wasn't pretty, it was engineered. The Kshari use stress patterns to encode vector sets and handshakes to lock them. Any Imperial listening would hear nonsense about rivers and teeth. Our fleet would hear turn left when the third light blinks. Ortega, I said, lace it with jokes. Knock, knock, he asked. Wry as you can make it, people who laugh breathe, people who breathe shoot straighter. He grinned, and in 30 seconds the net filled with call and response, a braided thing of meter and nonsense. We weren't the first to do this. The civil rights movement had taught logistics through spirituals when maps were illegal. The trick wasn't novelty. It was nerve. 3 Imperial fighters knifed into our shadow, hugging rock so their signatures blurred. Sanvi threw us into a scoot, too small to dignify as a maneuver, just a twitch, and their shots reached for where we weren't. We tossed glitter and ballast and bits of us that would be missed later, and 2 fighters overcorrected into stone. The third stayed clever. It tagged a refugee pod with a needle and started to tow. On it, Ortega said, and cut a beam so tight it might have been a thought. The tether parted. Kid back with the class. Thank you, someone said on the net, voice raw with the kind of gratitude that makes your knees weak. I didn't ask their name. Names are heavy. Captain T-Von whispered. The Oath is launching an interceptor. It's fast in a way that means money. Mark it, I said. We'll make it spend more. Meanwhile, Jonah's swarm was turning itself into an arrow with a wobble. They were broadcasting non-threat in bright colors. Med symbols, relief banners, the kind of thing a lawyer would screenshot. The interceptor bullied toward them anyway. 10 to target, Jonah whispered, then lower. 9. I hate counting. It turns life into a cliff with numbers painted on it. I turned away from his feed and back to ours. The convoy was threading through a canyon of leftovers and promises. The mirror swarm was working, poorly and beautifully. I could feel the Ardent Oath's fire control getting angrier at physics. Sanvi fed me a sacrament I didn't deserve. I can give you one more syncopated jump if you steal power from heating. We'll get cold. How cold? Scarf weather, she said. If we live, steal it. The ship sighed as warmth left the vents, breath fogged. Someone on the middeck started singing a winter song from a coast I hadn't seen since I was 19. The Pulsar beat on, relentless, mindless, honest. 6, Jonah said. 5. I opened a channel to the Oath. Matriarch Commander Lass, you are about to commit a war crime. Stand down your drone. Your swarm is hostile. They're carrying wrenches and stretchers. You destroyed a corvette. It tried to net babies. Silence. Maybe she had a conscience. Maybe she was checking a manual. Maybe both. 4, Jonah said. 3. Permission to deploy the idiot idea, Ortega said. You named it that and still want permission. It's good branding. Do it. He dumped a crate of solar sails. We had been hauling them to Omri 12 for a celebration that would have to wait, then popped open the crates mid-drift. The sails snapped out like lilies in time-lapse, bright as festival flags, stupidly cheerful in a battle. The fighters went wide to avoid the glare, too tangled anyway, and for a moment, just a moment, the rubble field looked like a parade. 2, Jonah said. 1. I watched his feed because I couldn't not. The drone arrowed for the hub like a sermon. Jonah's swarm flicked a faro line across its wake, magnetics whispering. The drone hiccuped just enough. A skiff named Milagros, paint scabbed and holy with prayers, nudged it with a bow no bigger than a van. The drone pinwheeled, clipped a mirror slab we'd left like a coin on a rail, and kissed the hub's armor at an angle that turned catastrophe into dent. Hub intact, Jonah gasped. Repeating, hub intact. Get home, I said, and only then realized my hands were shaking. The Oath got mad, not surface mad, cored out mad. Its belly opened and a new signature bloomed, not a lance, not a net. A canister the size of a bus wrapped in fields that tasted like you shouldn't touch them. It wasn't a nuke, it was worse. A resettlement pacifier, the euphemism said, an air stealer by any honest tongue tuned to strip out atmosphere and leave docks gasping. Options, I asked. Intercept, Sanvi said. Eat it and die, or ignore it and they die. Third option, Ortega said. Make it think it's already home. He sketched in air. If we hit the canister with the right scatter at the right beat, its sensors would misjudge position and pop early, uselessly into the pocket of cold between 2 rubble slabs. Risk, if we missed, we'd pop it in our teeth. What's the beat? I asked. Tivon's voice didn't tremble. Between our second and your third heartbeats. On you, poet, I said. The canister came like a quiet sin. We pushed our ship into its path and tilted a panel just so. Tivon counted. Da-dee-a-da-da now. Ortega touched a trigger like a violinist gifts a note. The canister sighed. For one horrible instant, the world tasted like winter. Then it was just a cold pocket between rocks. The ardent oath closed a fraction. The dreadnought on the high lane shifted, to coordination we hadn't seen before. And amid all of that, a small, human thing, a voice on the net, a child, said, "Are we going to laugh again?" "Not yet," I said and hoped he didn't hear me, but soon. Then the oath did something we didn't expect. It cut engines, it drifted, and a diplomatic beam we couldn't jam asked for parley. Captain Ray's matriarch commander last said, "Where did you learn to move like that?" "Sunday school," I said. "Do you want to talk or stall?" "Both," she said, and for the first time she sounded not certain, not cruel, just tired. We met in the only neutral place left, a wedge of vacuum equidistant from killing fields. Parley in the old sense, speak before you shoot again. I took Ortega because he could turn knives into jokes, and Tivon because a poet can say the same thing 3 ways and make truth in the overlap. Lass brought 2 officers with eyes like polished stone. "Your convoy is illegal," she began, as if she needed the ritual to steady herself. "Your doctrine is immoral," I said, because I needed mine. We floated in the shadow of a battered mirror slab. The pulsar flashed, clicked, blessed us with a heartbeat. Between beats, I counted faces. Lass's jaw ticked on the 2nd and 4th. She'd felt the rhythm, too. We all live under metronomes. "We lost a corvette," she said. "You almost lost a city. A resettlement pacifier is non-lethal." "In a vacuum," I said, "words like non-lethal get slippery." She made that sound people make when their education collides with their orders. "The empire stabilizes. Chaos follows mercy." "Mercy without consent is a museum," Tivon said gently, in Keshari and then in trade. "Everything preserved, nothing alive." Lass's eyes flicked to the poet. "Your verse in the bands, it hid vectors." "It taught them," Tivon said. "Hiding is for shame." Ortega, because he can't help himself, asked, "Do you ever laugh, matriarch commander?" Her mouth moved like she'd found a muscle she hadn't used in years. "When I was a cadet, when the hull held because I believed it would not." "Then you understand," I said. "We don't laugh at you, we laugh to keep from freezing." She looked past us at the convoy tucked among rocks like birds among thorns. "You cannot keep them all." "I know," I said, "but we can keep them now." The parley held for 10 minutes, measured in beats. We swapped offers and insults like cards. She wanted authority acknowledged. I wanted civilians untouchable. In the end, we made a bargain both sides could hate. We'd cut our convoy in half. We'd send 20 ships under Imperial escort to a port we could verify, with monitors from Omri 12 aboard. The rest would stay under our guns. It bought time. Time is the most human unit. Back aboard the Saratoga, the crew received the terms like a bruise. "We're trusting them," Sanvi asked, quiet and betrayed. "We're forcing them to be seen," I said. "Monitors make secrets heavy." Jonah, back from the hub with a cracked helmet and that new stoop men get when 10 minutes last a year, nodded. "It's midway math. You risk some to save many, and you pray." "Don't say pray," Ortega said. "It makes the universe feel judged." We spun up to escort the first 20. The rubble field thinned. The oath watched. The dreadnought stayed aloof, principled in its cruelty. The convoy shuffled like cards, and I felt the way a dealer must, responsible for every face. That's when the oath launched the thing behind the parley's back. We saw it late. A filament this time, a line of nothing. It snaked through shadows, avoided mirrors, slithered smart. Its tip glowed not with heat but with hunger. It wasn't going for ships. It was going for the pulsar itself to tweak the beat. If they could shift the rhythm by a fraction, our timing would break. We would be ants marching off a table we thought was there. "What kind of monster tampers a lighthouse?" Ortega whispered. "The kind that has never been lost at sea," Tivon said. "We could intercept if we left the 20 unescorted. We could stay if we let the universe's metronome fall out of tune." I looked at Jonah. He didn't flinch. "I'll take a wing and cut the filament. You run the escort." "No," I said, because my virtues include stubbornness disguised as love. "I'll cut, you escort." We fought in that economical way people do when they've rehearsed the lines but still hope for a different casting. Sanvi settled it by locking Jonah's controls for 3 seconds, long enough for me to bolt. I took the Saratoga under the filament's shadow. Up close, it wasn't a line. It was a braid of fields humming a song that made my teeth ache. I could see where it planned to kiss the Pulsar's magnetosphere, the exact place where our windows came from. If it succeeded, everything we'd built became clever stories with dead punchlines. "Sanvi, give me everything the coils have left," I said. "We're going to whip." "A solar sail whip is a bad idea under any circumstances," she said, "and we don't have a sail." "We have parade flags," Ordega said, "and I know how to tie knots." The crew moved like hands on a memory. We spooled leftover sail into a ribbon, anchored it to the hull, and burned hard in a wide, ugly arc. The ribbon kissed the filament with a crackle that crawled up my bones and wrote a new stanza on my nerves. The filament quivered. It did not break. "Again," I said. "Captain," Sanvi's voice had that thinness that means a ship is bleeding somewhere you can't see. "Again." This time the filament tore. It tried to heal itself like a lie in a meeting. The ribbon, our stupid, cheerful ribbon, held it open long enough for the Pulsar's next beat to slap it flat. Light brighter than sense washed the rubble. When the glare cleared, the filament was just a hair in a vacuum, harmless and drifting. "Status?" I asked and tasted copper. "Ribbon gone," Ordega said. "Hull scarred, coils angry, Captain." He didn't finish, but I felt the hole before he said it. "There's a silence ships make when someone is gone." "T-Von?" I asked. A beat, too, then a whisper. "Here, Wayfinder deck." A shard took Heck, the Zell quartermaster who could turn ration packs into feasts and arguments into compromises. Heck, who had a joke for every bruise. Heck, who had stood on the pier the first day and said, "Your ship is ugly, I love her." The bridge went very quiet in the loudest way. "Log it," I said, because command is cruel like that. "Name the next street after him." Ordega wiped his face with the back of his hand. "After them, Zell don't do him." "After them," I said, and fixed the word like a nail. On the scope, the ardent oath pulled back a fraction. The dreadnought tilted its nose, reconsidering a doctrine. The first 20 ships slid under our guns toward a port no one trusted, with Omri 12's monitors strapped in like ballast. Jonah's voice came soft over the net. "We're going to make it." "We're going to try," I said. "The difference matters." Behind us, the convoy breathed. Around us, the rubble sang. Above us, the Pulsar kept time. And in the middle of it all, a galaxy watched 2 tiny groups of primates attempt ethics in a vacuum, one stubborn choice at a time. "Captain," Ordega said, "when do we laugh?" "When we've put them all to bed," I said, and felt the cliff ahead where the rest of this would go. Coalition votes, a call to distant allies, a choice to fight a war or build a world. Somewhere beyond the glare, someone was listening who wasn't Imperial and wasn't ours. The band twitched. A new voice, amused, said, "Nice timing. Need a hand?" We did, and asking would cost pride we could spare and blood we already had. To be continued. "Nice timing. Need a hand?" The voice came from a ragged wedge of transponders that shouldn't have fit together, the way a junk drawer doesn't make a toolkit until you're desperate. Icons bloomed on our plot, tugboats with welded-on grapples, ambulance cutters with paint still flaking from old disasters, a retired ore barge with a new name stenciled crooked. Usk Harriet Tubman. At their center cruised a stubby carrier with its flight deck boxed in by modular habitats and gardens under glass. The tag read, "Harbor Chain Aux Com, Commodore Amal Engai." "Commodore," I said, feeling a knot behind my ribs loosen. "If you're selling luck, we're buying." "Not luck," she said. "Logistics. We've been shadowing this corridor since the first expulsions. We don't carry big guns. We carry stretchers, welders, and embarrassments. Permission to join your parade. Please, and bring your embarrassments." Her grin was a flash of teeth. "Copy, Harriet Tubman will seed witness beacons. Promise of loam will lay foghorns." "Foghorns?" Ordega asked, delighted. Acoustic metaphors for the visually impaired, Ngai said. Field generators that speak in the language of lousy sensors. They make big ships cautious. Behind her voice, the chain scattered into rolls like a jazz combo taking cues. Tugs spiraled toward Omri 12 with pallets of food, water, and that most critical commodity, blankets. The carrier offloaded med teams into the rubble like bees discovering flowers. Our plot filled with witness pips, unspoofable triple-signed recorders that would broadcast any atrocity to every public net within 100 light-years. Matriarch Commander Lass, I hailed. Be advised, the corridor is now under observation. Any resettlement action will be recorded and reviewed by neutral forums. You seek protection in shame? Her tone tried to be contempt. It landed closer to weary. We seek light, I said. Shame's a side effect. She did not answer. The ardent oath's fighter bays stayed sealed. The dreadnought on the high lane, Varkesh's crown, was not so contemplative. A new bloom flared along its spine. Jonah sucked air. Gravity shear. They're going to crush the rubble into buckshot and let momentum kill the convoy. Berlin airlift flickered through my head, planes landing every 30 seconds in a city someone else had decided could starve. You don't fight a famine with tanks. You fight it with schedules and stubbornness. Sanvi, I said, can we build a cushion? Not without a couch, she said. But I can stitch one together out of parade flags and spare mirrors. If we fly them into the shear's throat at the beat, we can make a pressure softener. It'll last 2 pulses, maybe 3. Harbor chain, I said. You ever tie a boat fender the size of a building? Ngai laughed. Captain Ray's, I've tied church steeples to coastal breakers. Tell me where to put the knots. Tivon slid a lyric in the net, their hexameter paired to the bone. 1, the sails bloom like fish. 2, the mirrors hinge toward mercy. 3, the grit falls left, not down. 4, we breathe. Convert that to vector sets, Ortega said, already threading jokes between the numbers. What do you call a gravitic shear who's late to work, underpressured? Groans spooled across the convoy. Good. Alive sounds as crews uncrated festival sails meant for a night we'd trade for breath. The harbor chain's tugs played out ribbon after ribbon, fastening them to slabs of rock and tanks of ballast until the rubble field looked like a Mardi Gras planned by engineers. The Crown's sheer field darkened the plot, a bruise stretching toward us. Mark the throat, Sanvi whispered. There. Okay, on my count. 3, 2, now. The sails snapped, glittering banners turning into math, mirrors flexed, ugly and perfect. The shear washed over our patchwork cushion and turned savage into stubborn. It still hit. It always hits, but it hit like a wave against pilings that refused to understand erosion. We bled velocity we could not afford and lived anyway. Cost, I asked. Parade flags are confetti, Sanvi panted. We've got 1 more cushion in us. Maybe. Convoy status, Jonah said. 10 ships through to Omri 12's near docks, Ortega replied. Monitors aboard, witness beacons pinging like a chorus. Lass opened a channel on a tight, clean band. You are clever, Captain Ray's. We're unimpressive, I said, but we're together. Believe it or not, she said, I respect that. Her respect lasted exactly 3 beats, then a thin, authoritative voice cut across her band, merciless and crisp. Matriarch Commander Lass, this is theater command. Rescind parley. Employ pacifiers and gravity instruments. Finish the matter. I heard her inhale. I felt the calculus happen behind her eyes. Obedience, career, doctrine on one side, monitors, beacons, a city of poets on the other. Between beats, she chose. Theater command, she said, voice level. Parley is binding for the present, civilians in proximity, proceeding with alternative doctrine. Alternative doctrine, Ortega mouthed. Hold your cushion, Lass said to me private again. I will contradict the Crown. The dreadnought's second sheer built, darker, crueler, Lass sent a formation of drones to skim its flank and dump counter-vectors. On paper, it looked like support. In practice, it raided the Crown's solution space, robbing it of coherence. The sheer stuttered, hissed, and spat gravel instead of bullets. Did she just? Jonah began. Accidentally on purpose, I said. The harbor chain whooped open, gratitude in every vowel. That bought us all of 15 seconds, Ngai said. Use them. We'll wrap the hub in blankets and bureaucracy. We shoved another 20 ships through, their hulls scuffing our paint. Their children waving at our cameras like parades refused to die. Somewhere amid the brief relief, Grief walked up and sat down. Heck was still gone. We had named a corridor Hexway and posted a schedule. It felt too small and exactly right. Tivon stood on the bridge with a bowl under one arm, Zell soup for morning, thick and sweet, earth in a world of metal. They set it beside my console without a word. I took a spoon between commands. I don't know if it helped my body, it helped my ethics. Captain, Ordega said, softer, we're not just keeping people alive, we're making the Empire watch us do it. Good, I said. Maybe they'll remember how. The Crown, infuriated, reoriented. The Oath, complicated, drifted closer to Omri 12 with its weapons stowed. The harbor chain added a new tag to the plot, Operation Choir. It carried a schedule and a promise, every beat another ship, every ship. Another life, every life, a song someone would know by heart. The galaxy doesn't turn because of one bright hero. It turns because a lot of tired people keep pushing on the beat. Operation Choir began with lists and ended with prayers. In between there were knots, broken fingers, schedules that could make a monk weep, and 1,000 very small, very brave choices. We stacked ships nose to tail on invisible lines that only made sense if you trusted the metronome. Every zero. 713 seconds, one slid, one braked, one swept the floor where it had stood. Convoy 4, Jonah murmured into the swarm band. You're the hinge. If you lag, the whole deck crew trips. Copy, a Kashari captain replied, voice smiling around his consonants. We remember fire drills. The Ardent Oath drifted closer still, playing the part of chaperone to the first 20 under escort. It held its nose at an angle that said we are not friends, but its fighter bays remained shut. Lass sent us the occasional meteorological update as if she were a harbor master and not the fist of a regime. Watch for eddies after the 5th pulse, she said once, and I did, and a freighter we had no right to keep upright did not tumble. The Crown had had enough. Its flank peeled open like a knife misbehaving, revealing an organ we hadn't seen, a resonance hammer tuned to stroke the pulsar's magnetosphere and knock the beat off by a fraction. Our cushion would fail. Choir would fall out of time. We'd go from jazz to traffic accident. Options? I asked. Catch the hammer, Sanvi said flatly, or break its arm. Can we break it without breaking the crew attached? She swallowed. Yes, maybe, if the oath helps. Matriarch Commander, I said, do you feel like committing a bureaucratic error? Her reply carried the flavor of a decision already made. My doctrine has evolved. We sketched it in 10 lines and a curse. The harbor chain would seed small, ugly mirror kites in a spiral up from the Crown's flank. Jonah would lead a wing of skiffs to tug the spiral into a helix, pretty on a diagram, murderous in a rubble field. The Oath would fire a wide, low-energy wash at a very improper time to soften the Crown's local field, not enough to register as an attack if anyone squinted the right way. We would ride the 5th pulse and slap the hammer's face with a ribbon of charged grit while whispering math we didn't know we knew. You're describing a carrier deck run, Jonah said, grinning because he had always wanted to fly before the fire. With less deck and fewer rules, I said. Don't die if you can help it. Sanvi kissed 2 fingers and pressed them to the Saratoga's bulkhead, a mechanic's benediction. I tuned the rings for impatience. They'll jump quicker than they should. Don't ask how long that lasts. Ordega strapped into a dorsal gun not because we planned to shoot. Our pebbles were rationed, but because sometimes a man needs a wheel. Tivon took the center of the bridge and spoke meter under their breath, a heartbeat under the heartbeat. Skiff wing away, Jonah reported. Milagros leading. The Crown's hammer began to swing, hungry and certain. The Oath brightened in a frequency that didn't look like fire control if you had good lawyers. The harbor chain's kites snapped into a ladder none of us had possessed a right to imagine. We rode the 5th pulse, a sideways fall that feels like a moral choice, and dumped grit into the hammer's throat. It coughed. It did not stop. Again, I said through teeth. Rings are hot, Sanvi warned. Coils are gossiping about mutiny. Promise them soup, I said, because I had Tivon's bowl in my hand and the taste of grief in my mouth. We did it again. The hammer's song wobbled. The oath's wash went just a hair brighter. Lass was gambling her commission and maybe her freedom so a poet could keep a convoy in meter. The harbor chain's kites tangled. One tug snapped a line and kept going because coast guards aren't built to stop in the middle. Jonah's wing threaded the helix, swapping positions like flowers in a time lapse. The Milagros, sweet scabbed saint, kissed the hammer's projector with a nose no bigger than a van and left a smear of paint and a blessing. The projector hiccuped, sulked, and shut down. For 3 glorious, undeserved pulses, choir sang. Then the crown showed us how empires lose gracefully. It cheated. It speared a skiff with a magnetic lance so fine it didn't trip a single alarm, and something in that skiff complained in a voice like Jonah's. "Talk to me," I said, far too calm. "Wing 2 is down a hand," he said, laughter denting the words because men named Park laugh when the world folds. "I'm light a power bus and possibly a knee. Milagros is dragging me. Don't repeat that to his wife." "Copy," I said, and only then realized Sanvi had risen and crossed the deck with a limp she hadn't owned at breakfast. The shock that had kissed the rings when we'd slapped the hammer had walked up her bones and written a bruise under her skin. She waved away my look. "Engines don't need ankles. We stabilized the wing, stabilized the ladder, stabilized our ethics." The oath blinked twice. "I am still with you," and the crown retracted its hammer with a dignity that said it would never admit we had touched it. On Omri 12's bands, the monitors, Keshari shopkeepers, and Or medics with new armbands read into the witness beacons like priests at a mass. "This is Sef of Block 12, one said, voice trembling and growing. "We are alive because the pacifier did not fire." We saw an imperial ship hold its hand. We saw a human ship tie rainbows to rocks and make the sky gentler. Do not tell us we are not citizens. Lass's silence felt like a surrender, but not to us, to the part of herself that had not laughed since she was a cadet. We coasted back to point and counted, 25 more ships across, a wing limping, a mechanic pretending her hands didn't shake, a poet adding a name to a list we would read out loud when this was done. "Captain," Ortega said, "the witness stream is trending across Imperial Citizens' channels. The top tag is not in our name." "That's hope," I said, "or trouble, usually both." The theater command's voice returned, thinner, angrier, closer to afraid. "Matriarch Commander Lass, you are relieved. Varkesh's crown assumes theater authority. All non-compliant assets will be neutralized." The crown pointed its prow at the Pulsar and decided to break the lighthouse. Breaking a lighthouse is a confession. It says you no longer believe in navigation, only in force. The crown's prow split again, this time revealing a fist of machinery wrapped in polite math. A resonance sledge, not a hammer, but a mallet, tuned to smear the Pulsar's beat into noise. You don't need to kill every ship if you can untime a sky. Lass came up on a private band with a voice stripped of insignia. "Raise, Crown is about to perform an abomination. I have 37 seconds before my comms are revoked." "What can you give me?" I asked. "A set of maintenance faults and a doctrine gap." She sent them with a quick, guilty pulse. "Their sledge has a phase anchor outside the hull for vibration testing. They never removed it. If you detune the anchor, the sledge will self-cancel. And the gap. They have never trained to fight a fleet that refuses to be enemy-shaped." "Thank you," I said and meant it. "My oath was to defense," she said, as if to herself. "Somewhere we started defending our authority instead of anyone's life." "We can write a new oath," I said because I believed it then. Her band dropped. The oath pivoted, visibly and metaphorically, away from the crown. Fighters rolled out not to attack, but to lay a no-shoot corridor between Omri 12 and the rubble like a man laying down his coat. It was a treason so gentle you could mistake it for traffic control. "Operation Choir," Engai said on wideband. "Phase 2 is live. We are now an airlift. If you have cargo space, you are a freighter. If you have a kitchen, you are a canteen. If you have a story, you are a broadcaster." "We need that anchor," I told my crew. It's bolted under the crown's skin 12 decks aft of proud. Lovely neighborhood, Ortega said. Do they serve tea? Jonah straightened like Payne had just paid rent it didn't owe. I can take a team. You're limping. I limp symmetrically, he said, and I grew up stealing copper from under corporate noses. This is the same crime, bigger sky. Sanvi's hand shot out and caught his sleeve. You are not allowed to die in someone else's maintenance crawl. I'll bring you back a bolt, he said, and for once his grin didn't work on her. She sighed and nodded anyway, the way families do when their love has edges. We launched a mosquito wing. Jonah, 2K Shari with hands like locksmiths, an ore medic who could talk a pulse down, and a Zell in a patchwork suit who'd started this week washing dishes and had somehow become our best linesman. Their cutter slid under the crown's shadow like a joke told up a sleeve. Witness beacons hot, Engai murmured. If he gets caught, we make arrests inconvenient. The crown swung its sledge into position. The pulsar ticked, unaware it was about to be blurred. Tivon began to recite, voice steady as a bridge deck officer calling speed. Aristotle said, no, not him, not today. A soldier poet from the coast said, do what's in front of you. A monk from a cold empire said, act as if the world depended on you and then act like it doesn't. A captain from a small navy said proportionality is not cowardice. Keep talking, I muttered, fingers white on the armrests. He listens to poems. The cutter found the anchor, a puckered blister with test only stamped in an alphabet that thought it ruled grammar. Jonah popped the first bolt. The Zell hissed a tune that might have been a lullaby and might have been a drill's prayer. The K-Shari's fingers danced. The ore medic held the light like he was holding breath. The second bolt gave. The third stripped. We don't have time, Jonah said, which is something you say when you absolutely will take the time. He wedged a tool under the stripped bolt, levered, and the universe gave him a shimmering field of wrong to chew on. The bolt screamed and spun. The anchor slid. The sledge spun up to hit a loose instrument with a name we would later invent. Back, Jonah said. Now. They made it 3 meters before the sledge kissed itself. The shock rippled across the crown's flank and wrote a bad word in delicate machinery. A dozen fuel lines broke up with a dignified cough. The sledge went quiet, a dog that did not know it had been muzzled. The crown did not take it well. Its secondary batteries opened on everything that looked like a mosquito. The cutter tucked under a girder that did not know it was a saint. One ore wingman died in a way that left his body unbloody and his name heavy in our mouths. I have him, Lass said, reckless now, ordering a squadron to fly dumb between the crown's guns and the rubble. She was ruining her life beautifully. Operation Choir, Engai said, half-choked. We are hot-loading food onto Harriet Tubman straight from promise of loam. If you drop something, scream and someone will catch it. If you can sing, sing. Morale is a consumable. We became a city under siege behaving like a block party. Kids on Omri 12 stood in gravity wells with chalk and wrote welcome in half a dozen scripts on the decks where refugees would step. A K-Shari baker welded his oven to a forklift. Ortega patched the news bands so the witness stream overlay an old holiday movie of little boats and bigger hearts. Laugh lines wrote themselves in the corners of tired eyes. Then Theater Command issued Edict 77. It came with too many seals and not enough shame. Pacifiers authorized region-wide, timing instruments approved, witness beacons to be confiscated. The net went quiet for a second, as if we'd all taken the same breath at once. Then 1 million civilians on 1,000 worlds started typing not in our name in 1,000 tongues. The witness stream became a flood. Even empires drown. We had a window 1 hour before the crown's replacements came online, before someone braver or stupider than last took the oath away. We could run. I looked at the plot, at the faces, at the bowl Tivon had brought. We're not running, I said. We're going to lock the crown and shelter the oath. We build a standing wave, pulsar on one side, mirrors on the other. We freeze them in a harbor they can't deny. Sanvi stared at me, then at the ring's indicator glowing the terrible amber of almost. We'll burn the lateral banks to the keels. I know. She nodded, a benediction and a sentence. Then we do it right. We named it the Pulsar Gambit in the log because names make plans real. The idea was ugly and elegant. Use the pulsar's beat to set up a standing wave between rubble mirrors seated by the harbor chain and a tuned echo in the Saratoga's rings. The wave would snare the Crown's mass projectors and the Oath's flight deck, pinning both in a bubble that made firing solutions nonsense and rescues easy. Do it wrong and we'd cut lanes we needed. Do it right and we'd invent a harbor. Anchors in positions 1 through 8, Ngai called. Harriet Tubman is bow out in case this goes sideways and anyone needs to get dragged somewhere that isn't here. Witness beacons are painting, Ortega said. Imperial public interest is at can't look away and rising. Skiff wing? I asked. Jonah answered from a couch he had no right to be in. Strapped in if I pass out Milagros drives. Not funny. Then it's appropriate, he said, which was the kind of philosophy you get at hour 20. Tivon threaded their voice through the net. Hook we begin between beats where courage lives. Verse we tie mirrors to remember the light. Chorus we laugh because fear's teeth are duller when you do. Bridge we hold. The pulsar ticked indifferent honest. Sanvi tuned the rings beyond sane tolerance and beyond that into genius. On the next offbeat, she said, we throw the echo. Then we pretend to be bigger than we are. On you, I said. 3-2 now. The Saratoga shuddered. The mirrors lit, ugly slabs turned holy by math. The wave rose like a wall in a dream, glass and gravity, and the Crown's projectors walked right into it. Their targeting went jealous soft. Their doctrine tripped on a curb. Ardent oath, I hailed. We caught you too. You're safe in here. If you move, you break the wall. Lass's voice came back low. I am so very tired of walls, holding position. The Crown bucked. It threw counters like a rich man throws lawyers, expensive and not designed to meet resistance. The wave flexed, groaned. The Saratoga's rings screamed in a language only engineers and old sailors understand. Sanvi, I asked. Tell my mother I used the degree, she said, and then softer. I can hold for 20 pulses. Choir, Ngai said, businesslike through tears. That's 20 beats to clear the corridor, make a habit of not dying. They moved like a city that had rehearsed for a festival and found a miracle. Skiffs danced, refugee pods tucked into cradles, Omri 12 open doors it hadn't cut yet. The Oath pivoted a fraction to make a better windbreak with its shadow. The Crown tried to reach past the wall and found ethics there. 5 pulses, Sanvi said. I can feel heat in my teeth. 4, Tivon murmured, braid slipping loose, voice steady. 3. A Corvette caught half in, half out of the bubble, spun, lost systems, and broadcast a code that means we are not your enemy. We are drowning in a dialect I'd only ever heard in accident reports. Ortega looked at me. If we help them, we lose focus. If we don't, I said, we become the thing we asked Lass not to be. Wing 3, Jonah said before I could. With me, Milagros, you're the stubborn end. He and his broken knee hauled a net across a gulf and snagged the Corvette by its pride. They dragged it into shelter. Sometimes the right thing is also the clever thing. Sometimes it just costs. 2 pulses, Sanvi said. Captain, I know. I can give you one more if I burn the rings into art. Burn them, she smiled, a bright crack in a tired face. I always wanted to sculpt. The last pulse hit like a verdict. The wall held, then tore, then froze, then became a new shape I don't have words for, something between a lullaby and a siren. We lost the lateral banks. We kept the harbor long enough. Corridor clear. Ngai said, voice breaking beautifully. Omri 12 is full of people and promises. Choir complete. On the wideband, somewhere in the Empire, a civilian newscaster started crying and could not stop. Her co-anchor, an old man with scales that had seen wars and famines, set a hand on hers and said, Let them go. Let them live. We are not better if we are cruel. The Oath powered down weapons and broadcast its crew roster to the witness beacons, names, the most dangerous ammunition. Lass transmitted her resignation, addressed not to theater command, but to the people she was supposed to protect. The Crown backed water, not from mercy, but because the ground under its doctrine had gone soft and it did not know how to march on mud. Saratoga floated, rings smoking, hull scarred, heart loud. Sanvi sagged into a chair and let herself be held by an ore medic who had come aboard without asking, because that's what neighbors do. Jonah leaned Milagros against our bow and swore he would never admit he needed a crutch. Ortega read the witness comments aloud until laughter found the room like a feral cat rediscovering a lap. We named streets. Hexway ran along the spine of Omri 12's new quarter. Milagros' cut curved past a school that had been a warehouse yesterday. The harbor chain painted a mural on Harriet Tubman's bulkhead. A pulsar, a ribbon, a wall that was also a harbor. Someone drew the ardent oath there too, tilted just so, because history isn't honest unless it includes the people who changed their minds. Lass sent one last message before her band went dark. "Tell your poet I laughed today, once." "I'll tell them," I said. "We kept a street for you too." After the Accords had names, the Pulsar Accords, no pacifiers in civilian density, monitors guaranteed, corridors recognized, a review of resettlement doctrine so severe it would make a mess of careers, and if we were lucky, repair a piece of a galaxy. People argued about whether we had won. They always do. I don't think we won. I think we arrived. On the bridge, with the lights low and the rings cooling and the stars back in their proper rhythm, Ortega tossed me a repair list that would make a quartermaster faint. "Captain?" "Yeah, when do we laugh?" I looked at my crew, my found family, Sanvi with her hands wrapped, Jonah with his knee wrapped, T-Von with their voice wrapped around a promise big enough for a city. The ship creaked the way old houses do when they settle into good bones. Omri 12 pinged a video of kids drawing with chalk on new decks. Somewhere a baker banged a pan and offered bread to a stranger. "Now," I said, "we weren't faster than the Empire. We were on time, and the beat was ours."